This man is 5,000 kilometres from home. The year is 1915. The stretch of ocean he paddles across will, for some time, be named after him. This man has fought against imperial occupiers. He has been exiled to foreign lands, but will return to see his homeland freed from colonial oppression. Who is he? His name is I'iga Pisa.
This man is my great-grandfather.
Sonny's great-grandfather holds a unique place in Samoa's history. He rose up against the German occupiers as a part of the Mau A Pule and later worked with the New Zealand administration. Along the way, he witnessed all of Samoa's major recent historical events. But before we can really understand I'iga's story, we need to understand Samoa's.
What probably makes sense if we go back to that moment, which really happens in 1899, where Samoa's divided into two, where the US gets the part that we know as American Samoa, and New Zealand, which had been trying to secure the western part, gives up its claim very unhappily, and the western part goes to Germany. And out of that moment where we get a formal German government in the west and a formal US government in the east, that's the moment that Samoans begin to realise that actually their country, they've lost something about their country.
The Germans settled quickly, building thriving industries off the back of abundant copper plantations.
And they start passing laws that aren't just for Germans and white people, for Palangis, but actually they think that Samoans are going to, these laws are going to apply to Samoans. And Samoans, I think many Samoans hadn't anticipated that would happen. And so quite quickly, there's a response to this German imposition of German colonial law.
The seed of that response started small, with Samoans refusing to pay taxes or playing the very English sport of cricket as a form of protest. But it would grow into something much larger.
What prompted the Mau A Pule was from their point of view that the German governors at the time, on behalf of the Kaiser in Germany, were trying to take over Samoa, and they didn't want that.
It starts coming to a head as quickly as 4 years after the Germans take over. What we see is, out of the Samoan political elite, a commitment to try and find a more consolidated, traditional Samoan response to German colonialism. And the visible leader of that effort is a man called Loaki Namalaru Mamoi, and he uses his group of very powerful tulawhale or orators to consolidate a Samoan opposition, and that becomes known as the Mau A Pule.
One of Lauaki's lead supporters was Sonny's great-grandfather, I'iga Pisa, a Matai from the Mau stronghold of Pu'apua in Savaii.
They call him Pisa, but his full name is Tu'u Pisa Moa Moa. If translated is Li Pisa to serve the constituency of Amoa. I'iga, coming from a father being a priest, so he could write and read because of the Faisi'au, the missionaries. So his whole idea was to record the minds of the chiefs.
Samoa is one of the most literate places in the world in the 1800s. I'iga Pisa is a writer, so he writes at multiple points in his life.
I am here to record the meetings and that sort of thing. I guess that's his role, and which Lauaki trusted him. Remember, in those days, writing and recording things is a Palangi thing. And that's how I'iga joined the Mau, and he also had the trust of the elders.
The Mau were organised and had agency, moving between Savaii, Upolu and Tutuila, giving speeches and gathering support.
The Germans are consistently worried that at any given moment, the natives, as they see them, could could tip from giving speeches to being violent. And you know, many of these Samoan men were experienced warriors. They had guns, and there were more Samoans with guns than there were Germans. And so at any given moment, you could understand if you're being coercive, if you're trying to rule in other people, and yet they are people who know how to defend themselves and have fought in the past, you can see their fear.
The Mau A Pule gathered massive support amongst Samoans, and the politically astute Lauaki became a worrying prospect for the German governor, Wilhelm Solf.
The governor was clearly panicked, and his response was actually, he called in the most powerful navy that existed in the Pacific at that time, the Asiatic Squadron of the German Navy, and they came from China, and then they essentially parked between Upolu and Savai'i. We would see these as battleships now, parked between the two Samoan islands to stop traditional travel between them, and then pointed guns at Samoan villages. These are big, like huge guns that would flatten Samoan villages. And then they basically sort of stared Lauaki down, at which point he decided for the good of Samoa that he would let them exile him. And so all up, over 70 Samoans are sent from Samoa, you know, thousands of miles, of kilometres away, to the Mariana Islands.
When I see them sitting on the deck of the boat, I'iga sitting down, some are standing up, I think Lauaki's standing up. I just feel the whole alienness of it, being on a boat on the sea, on a Baalangi boat at that, knowing that you're not going to see pretty much, because some of them were old and most didn't make it back. You'll never see Samoa again.
So what was life like for them in Saipan?
So it would have been quite self-sufficient, if you like, a little community on their own. And so their everyday life would probably be centered around finding food, cooking food, growing food, and doing things like that.
So we actually have some quite good detail about that experience there. I mean, it is interesting to see Samoans in a non-Polynesian setting, because Samoans are everywhere in Polynesia, but in Micronesia they live as Samoans because it's the same food, same trees. The Chamorro of Saipan treat them very well. And actually even the German officials there treat them relatively well. But the simple truth is, of the 10 Matai who leave Samoa, I'iga Pisa is the only one who ever sees Samoa again. And that's a very powerful thing to reckon with.
I'iga knew that as soon as he returned to Samoa, knowing how to speak German would greatly help his and the Samoan cause. So he walked miles every day to the local German school, where German speakers taught him the language.
So in 2016, we went to Guam, and I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to go to Saipan, where I'iga and the Mau A Pule were. I went to the village that they built there, you know, building a home away from home. And nothing was there anymore. It was just the remnants of a lost civilization, if you like. It put a context to it, you know, that this was a real thing.
He always wanted to find out what was happening in Samoa. And when they did then find out about that the First World War had started, and that the New Zealanders had taken on behalf of Britain, Great Britain, he immediately made plans to return because he wasn't sure whether they were coming back.
English was the only way that you could survive and keep the tautua for your family if he gets back. He did say to Lauaki, o te whiaalu, o te seawala toi for e Samoa, and Lauaki said to him, I'iga, where are you going? We're in the middle of nowhere. How are you going? You're going to die in the ocean, in the big ocean. And he said to him, and God will find a way to guide him back.
Now, I'iga needed to learn English, and the closest place he could learn English was in Guam, and that was 220 kilometers away from Saipan. But the next thing he did was, wow.
After 6 years in Saipan, he set his sights on Guam and the English language. The local Chamorro people gifted I'iga a pao, and he set sail across the deepest stretch of ocean on the planet.
He did say that Lawaki said, "Saunaalu, come and go and do your will, what you want to do." And he said, Lawaki put his hands on his head and blessed him.
Yeah, he stops at a couple of islands on the way, islands like Rota and Tinian, and then eventually, with the support of the people on those islands, ends up in Guam. And Guam at that point has been an American colony since 1899 as well. And there he is taken in by Chamorro there. He can speak some Chamorro, but he can't really speak much English. And he sets out to learn English. When he arrives, he is taken to the governor of Guam, who's a US naval governor, and then sort of takes an interest in him, gives him a job where I'iga learns not just English, but also printing. And he stays in Guam for actually quite a long time.
There's no one better for Sunny to ask about Guam than his cousin and I'iga's wife's namesake, Fa'utu, who accompanied Sunny's mother and the rest of the family to the I'iga and the other exiles' 100-year commemoration in Guam and Saipan in 2015.
Hi.
Hi!
So, when you went to Guam,
And Saipan.
what was it like to do all that?
Really had no idea what we were going into other than we were going to commemorate the old man, his journey from Saipan to Guam, but then it also looked at the history of the exiles or the exilees that were there. Just to be there as a family, to honor the legacy that we've all heard about, right?
Yeah.
We grew up hearing about that, I'iga Pisa, I'iga. But actually being there and to stand there, there was still mana that you felt when you were standing there.
He was a very tall and handsome man. These good looks have been passed down through all generations. He was a wise man who spoke when needed.
What did my mum do in Guam? What did she talk about?
So she actually spoke about her personal relationship with Grandpa Inno.
These linguistic skills would prove to be extremely vital in future historical events.
So her presentation was very much a personal,
Oh, yeah.
insight into the man, speaking
yeah.
of the man versus the myth. So she really talked about how
She loved.
yeah,
She was.
as the eldest grandchild, she was basically revered by the old man, taken everywhere with him,
Yeah.
and
raised by them.
and raised by
your
him,
namesake.
yeah, by I'iga and Fa'autu. So yeah.
The ultimate champion and ambassador of I'iga's name, Sunny's mother died in 2021. From Guam, I'iga moved to Hawaii, where he continued to work at a printing press and learn English. And in 1919, with funds sent from his brother for his fare home, it was time for I'iga to return to Samoa.
No, so he had to get permission granted on the US side. One of the things that colonialism does is it constrains the movement of non-white people. But he did have sort of endorsements from various influential Palangi people, from Germans that he knew in Samoa, and then from the colonial governor of Guam, who facilitated both his job in Hawaii and his trip back to Tutuila.
It had been 10 long years since he last stood on Samoan soil.
Yes, he walked into his family and they didn't even know him, recognize him.
So he kind of likes that no one recognises him initially. And in one of his accounts that he writes, they thought I was Afakasi from somewhere else.
He arrived back to no fanfare and a completely new colonial climate, with the New Zealand administration still learning the governing game and failing at it, highlighted by their devastating decision to allow the Spanish flu to rip through Samoa.
Everything is in German, and all the records, and so the people who are able to speak what are effectively the three languages of Samoa German, English and Samoan, become very influential people. Inga's unusual in that he has English, he can speak German as well, and he speaks Samoan, of course, as his mother tongue.
Colonel Robert Logan, recognising that I'iga would be a great asset, wasted no time in offering him a job working with the New Zealand administration as a secretary to the Department of Native Affairs.
That's a really powerful moment, and it's a bit scary, you know. Are you going to put your cards on this side or that side?
He never wrote why he made his decision, whether it was to continue his work opposing the colonial powers, but this time from the inside, or to secure his family's future. In the end, he took the job. It was where he would work until he retired.
Yeah, that's his role at the time, I suppose. It was to translate and try and make peace, you know.
Peace was paramount. The rise of the second Mau movement was building momentum as the 1920s looked to be taking a tumultuous turn. It must have been a hard thing for I'iga to reconcile.
Knowing that there were elements of the resistance movement continuing under the New Zealand administration, I would imagine also that he would probably feel quite torn in loyalty. Because I often wondered why he didn't join the Mau of the 1920s. But it's something I never was able to ask him.
So from his angle of vision, from the way he sees the world, not knowing what we know about what's going to happen, you can understand why he might make that choice.
I believe there were different factions, different opinions as to whether Samoans should be involved in the administration. There were people that said, yeah, to fight for, you know, our rights. Yeah. And others were like, no, because they're not doing anything for the people of Samoa. I'm assuming because I'iga was there, he was of the lot that believed that change could be made from the inside.
Oh, yeah. It would have been a very difficult position for the old man to be in, really, trying to reconcile everything that he was doing himself, and then seeing his way clearly in terms of guiding our own family affairs.
People were calling him Judas, you know, Rome Fa'alata. Everybody feel that they were betrayed by him. I would have said the same too. You know, but it didn't stop him because he feels maybe we're doing the right thing. If we're all peaceful, nobody would get injured, you know, get hurt. So, yeah.
But people were about to get hurt. On December 28, 1929, tensions between the Mau and the New Zealand administration reached tipping point when the New Zealanders opened fire on a group of peaceful protesters, killing 11 people, including one of the talismanic leaders of the Mau, Tupua Tamasese Lofi III. I'iga was called on to try and quell the anger.
I'iga's job was essentially to either be the meat in the sandwich, or to be a mediator, or to be in a place where others might see less forgivingly as to be a colonial kind of instrument. It's easy to see these things in black and white, but once you start seeing that, well, not all Samoans were on the same page. You know, if there weren't Samoans working with the colonial government, there's no question that it would have been even more brutal. At the end of the day, we all have to look after our families and eat, and that many of us would take and have taken jobs that, if we followed the whole logic through, don't align with our deeply held values. So the world was no less complex back then.
So I'iga Pisa the man, I'iga Pisa the myth, we know all these wonderful, great feats that he achieved. And of course, we need to know those things. But what was he like as a man? If you could spend like half an hour with I'iga Pisa, what would you like to say to him?
Half an hour? That's like...
I know, but that's what you got. That's all the
oh my
article
God, I
said.
spent most of it crying and hugging him.
Okay, that's right. Well, that's 45 minutes.
I remember he used to sing a song to put me to sleep, and it goes like this. My name is Masunu, and he goes, Ia le masunu, sunu. Ia le masunu, sunu. I try and sing it to my children. It's it's my favorite memory of him.
We grew up only hearing the myth. The man, I heard about it from mama, from dad. So when this was a two-story house, they would always go to massage his legs. If a foanga vaima o ngalinga pamakala I whangongol ko I'iga, where he would tell legends.
But one thing for sure, he was a damn good leader of our family in terms of being our matai, because he managed to protect all our family Mesina. He was a great figure in the history of Samoa, but I think he was a greater matai for our own family.
Sonny's great-grandfather, a family man and a man for history.
I sort of described him as the Forrest Gump of Samoa. So, yeah, Forrest Gump turns up at all these famous moments, and to the point where Forrest Gump has to be a made-up story. But actually, I'iga's not, right? You know, he's there in American Samoa. He's there when he's deported. He's there in Hawaii. He's there in the 1920s with the Mau. And then he turns up in 1954 when they start talking about the independence of Samoa. He's actually in the Constitutional Convention. And then he's here when he comes to New Zealand as the interpreter when they come to negotiate what becomes Samoa's independence.
After 62 years of colonial rule, on the 1st of January 1962, Samoa saw in her independence. I'iga Pisa was the only surviving matai from the original Mau movement to finally see Samoa's freedom.
Well, I was there. I was one of the age for my father, and I was very proud of our people that they acquired independence before any of the others. And I felt that it was a wonderful justification of the Mau movement. You know, here is independence at long last. And here is independence that was won with struggling and with leadership and vision.
He did wrote down in one of his last entries, "Watuturu roimata o le fifia." I guess if you translate that as I'm shedding a tear of joy listening to the sound of freedom, which is our national anthem.
Quite remarkable that in his lifetime, he was born in a free, independent Samoa, and he died in a free and independent Samoa. And he was there to ease Samoa out of colonialism.
Only 3 years after independence, I'iga Pisa passed away. He now rests next to Sonny's mother at the family home in Vaiala.
His story isn't really our family's story. It's the story of Samoa because it's part of the history of why we're here in the first place, right? Like, it's a story that every single Samoan should know so that they know that it's in them to fight for your own rights, fight for sovereignty, fight for like the Samoa, fight for our culture, fight for the family unit, whether it's the nuclear or the aiga Olevia.
The first legacy we all leave is our descendants, right? And of course he's got an enormous, really prominent family who make an enormous contribution to not just Samoa, but of course New Zealand and other parts of the world. So, you know, he speaks through his ngafa.
It's important that our future generations know where they came from and the hardships they went through. In order for them to move forward, they need to know what happened in the past. I think as a family, we've always wanted to share the story, which is just a matter of timing.
I'iga Pisa, a man who left an incredible legacy and who witnessed and influenced some of the most important moments in the recent history of Samoa. From ushering in independence to the formation of the Mau, I'iga Pisa helped mould modern-day Samoa.
That contribution around a resistance movement which was founded and operated on truly traditional Samoan protocols and values and culture and oratory, to be a part of that was a powerful demonstration of just what Samoan culture can accomplish. And then also those same values led him and those other Matai to accept what for most of them would be essentially a death sentence on the basis of those same values, to stand up and to take it for their people and their villages. And it's pretty powerful stuff.